Okay, here's the track I got from the tool room. Here's that little rail that saw will guide in. And then here is a little plastic piece right there that I'm gonna line up with the line that I'm gonna make to cut this board. So when you hear me talk about the line and lining up the track with the line, that is referring to putting that little plastic piece on that line. I'll show you a close-up of that later. So what I'm gonna do is get a square and make a line that I wanna square up this board. So I guess my clamp's in the way, so let me take my clamp out here. I'll line up my square with the edge here, make a line so I know where the track is gonna live. So I'm just gonna square up one end of this board. Before I do that, I want to make sure that I have enough length of board here to make my top. So let me measure my top off camera here. The finished length is going to be 19 inches. So I got to make sure I have at least 19 inches here. So let's see here if I hold my tape measure at 19. I'm going to bring my line back a little bit so I have enough room to work with. So I'm just gonna barely trim this end out so I can make sure my top's long enough for my project. That would be horrible if you cut it too short and had to make a new top. Okay, so there's my line. Get you in closer here. These close-ups are kind of weird. So that was my first line I made, and then I realized that it was too far apart, so I readjusted it. Get this thing tighter in here. So I'm going to be using this line right here to line up that track. Ooh, right there. So I'm going to get my track lined up just like this. So that plastic bit that we talked about earlier is on that line. So that's going to look like this, right? Something just like that right there. So we have that plastic piece lined up with that line. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to get into the case here and get my clamps. These clamps hold the rail on. And the way these work, they go on the track like this. And like this. And they come in. I'll get my line lined up like we showed you. And those clamps clamp the rail to the board. And that way it won't go anywhere while you're cutting. Snug those down, get our saw in our rail. Make sure it's deep enough to cut here. So this saw works like this. You got to push this little button down with your thumb in order to plunge. So it's a plunging mechanism. So you start the saw like this, and then you plunge down into the work and make your cut. So a few things we got to do before we make this cut is one, plug the saw in. And the saw gets plugged in. Where does the saw get plugged in? Right here. So we're going to plug that saw in. Give it a little twist. And the cord doesn't get plugged into the wall. The cord gets plugged into this little vacuum right here, there's a port right there. You just plug it right into. And then it's got a built-in dust collector deal. So this is like a portable dust collector for the saw. And then this portable dust collector gets plugged into the dust chute here. And we're gonna plug that into the dust chute like that. And then last thing we gotta do is plug the vacuum into the wall power, and then we can make our cut. Okay, so let's see if it's plugged in. Cordless mic, nice. So when I turn the saw on, the vacuum turns on too. All right, so now what we're gonna do is make our cut. We're gonna start right here. Make sure it's nestled in the track, and then so I made 2 mistakes. One mistake is I didn't put this clamp on. 2 mistakes is it didn't go all the way through my cut, so I need to get my blade deeper. To do that, I'm gonna push this little stop down right here. I'm gonna lower that little guy down a little bit. So that should make my blade deep enough, and that clamp right there should stabilize my cut. Okay, so that's how you square up the board. I'm going to cross cut this to my final number, which is 19. And to do that, it's the same process. We're just going to flip it over. Clamp it down, draw a line at 19 inches. Use our square to make that line longer. Use that line as our reference for our track saw and go ahead and finish our cut. And again, I'll do that off camera. Okay, the last step I did off camera was I cut this to 15 wide on the table saw. So now that I'm rip to width, cross cut to length, I can set this aside for now and continue to work on my the rest of the project. All right, that's the top.